So, quick note before we get into today's episode. We originally recorded this on Friday, and there have been some developments over the weekend, so we wanted to give you a quick update.
Yeah, so this episode largely centers around the ceasefire between the US and Iran and whether it will hold. And this weekend, Vice President Vance went to Pakistan to negotiate with the Iranians. The talks fell through because there was a disagreement about whether or not nuclear enrichment should be covered under the deal. In response, the US has instituted a naval blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, and the Iranians are saying that a deal is within reach and that they think that it's achievable, but goalposts shifted on them. So this more or less tracks with what we say in the episode, that there's going to be a ceasefire. The two sides are still kind of far away and disagree about what should be in a deal. But at the same time, the ceasefire will likely hold on paper, at least for the next week and a half, even if conflict between the US and Iran increases on other fronts, like through the blockade.
So, with that, let's get into the episode. Hey, welcome to Quotient. Thanks for being here. I'm Shira, co-founder and CMO at Quotient. On this show, my job is to ask the questions you're thinking about and connect the dots between what's happening in the world and what it means for the markets.
And I'm Jordan, co-founder and CEO at Quotient. I built Q, which is our AI forecasting system that tracks world events prediction markets and identifies where markets and the media are getting them wrong. And that's what I do all day. And I'm really excited to get to share more about Q, world events prediction markets, and where we think different world events are headed.
So Quotient shows you what's actually happening in the world before the market catches up. So if you want to understand what prediction markets are really telling us and make sense of what's going on in the world and learn how to act on it, you're in the right place. So for this week's episode, we're going to get into a lot that's going on between U.S., Iran, Israel, and Lebanon. There are ceasefire deals on the table, negotiations happening in Pakistan, and strikes are still going on. And really the big question is are any of these deals actually real? Because Q is looking at the markets around all of this and seeing some major gaps between what people are betting on and what's actually happening on the ground. So we're going to break all of that down today. But first, we wanted to show you how Q's been doing.
So let's look at Q's recent track record. So what you're seeing here is Q's track record page, where for every prediction we do for a world events market, we look at what were the odds at the time of our prediction, which direction was our prediction, yes or no, and where was Polymarket at the time. So this allows us to compare our performance against what the crowd thought. And it also lets us look at what would the ROI have been if we traded based off of that information. So there's one cluster of wins for us that are related to the market and the media overestimating how quick Russian advances and Ukrainian counteroffensives would result in battlefield results in the conflict in Ukraine. So for instance, when the market thought there was an 81% chance that Ukraine would re-enter Rodinsky by April 30th, we thought that there was closer to a 28% chance. And the market has now converged towards our position, pricing it at about 31%, which would have been a 265% return. Similar situation on the other side with the will Russia capture Kostavinka by June 30th, where the market thought that there was a 77% chance. Q thought that there was like a 15% chance, and the market is resolving towards our forecast. And this is reflective of just the difficulty of taking and holding territory in a battlefield where the proliferation of drones and long-range standoff weapons has made it really difficult for people to maneuver on the battlefield. So this is how Q works, and the value of Quotient, which is kind of encapsulated in this spread. So the spread is what is the distance between the market's position on a question and Quotient's forecast. And if I click Israeli forces cross the Litani River by June 30th, as of 3 days ago, we thought the chances of this happening were like 17%. The market thinks that they're 32%. And we walk through the reasoning for why we think that the odds are the way that they are with the key factors and the backing citations for review. So right now we're kind of focused on how can we make this information more accessible to people, both in terms of media, because people don't really want to necessarily read through reports like this. People like videos and articles, and also kind of packaging these opportunities into trades, because it's great to have a sense of what's going to happen in the future. But if you give people a bunch of opportunities, how are they supposed to choose which is right for them? So that's what we're working on right now. But yeah, that's Quotient in our forecasting platform and how we work.
In some of the markets that you were sharing where there's been some wins, it seems that what is happening is that Q keeps saying that the market and this thing that everyone expects to happen quickly and is maybe reacting emotionally towards isn't actually going to happen that quickly. And Q keeps being right about that. Is that something you think Q is generally good at, or is that something that you think differentiates Q from maybe some of the other kind of traders in the space?
Yeah, I mean, I think that in general, people can be swayed by hype. Like they hear something is happening on social media, they see that it's getting a lot of engagement and intuitively makes sense. And we're growing more accustomed generally as a culture to things happening really quickly because of like AI and advancements in technology. But in a lot of these world events markets, we're starting to come up against kind of real structural constraints where certain things that seem easy actually are a lot harder than they look. And if they're going to happen at all, are going to take longer than people think that they're going to take. So that's definitely an area where Q is good at understanding those dynamics and generating forecasts based off of that. And an area where I think people kind of consistently make decisions and assessments in error.
All right. So there's been a lot going on between the US, Iran, Israel, and Lebanon. Um, what are you seeing in the markets, including any mispricing between what the market thinks and what Q thinks, mostly as it relates to what's going on with the ceasefire?
Yeah. So the bottom line on the ceasefire is that it's going to continue to exist on paper, but I don't think that we're going to see a resolution of the factors that led to the conflict such that the rest of the world is going to share in the economic benefits of a ceasefire. So, namely, the flow of oil resuming through the Strait of Hormuz, and for the risk of kind of missiles and other conflict in the Middle East to abate. But starting with kind of the ceasefire itself between the US and Iran, the market thinks that the odds are 27% that Trump declares it over by April 21st. Quotient thinks that the odds are 10%. And this reflects that we think that the Trump administration wants to claim a win, and the ceasefire, they're under a lot of kind of pressure to get some pause in the conflict that they could present as a victory over Iran. And right now, the Trump administration can say that we threatened to destroy their infrastructure. They came to the table. That's a win of sorts. But in the longer term, I don't think that there's really alignment between the US and Iran sufficient to kind of negotiate the outcome that is supposedly on the table. And I think that part of this is kind of reflected by a lack of understanding of Iran's strategic culture by the Trump administration, where they seem to believe that they can apply a bunch of pressure to Iran and then Iran will capitulate. But I think that confusing this temporary ceasefire for capitulation by Iran is unwise. But and there's a great quote from before the conflict started by Steve Witkoff that reflects this belief that the Trump administration has. If we want to play that.
Frustrated. It's almost because he understands he's got plenty of alternatives, but it's curious. He's curious as to why they haven't. I don't want to use the word capitulated, but why they haven't capitulated.
The national security state, which is running Iran, led by the RGC, they fought the Iraq war for 8 years. They fought in Lebanon with Hezbollah against Israel. They've resisted more than a decade of very intense US sanctions to preserve their nuclear program and to preserve, in their view, their sovereignty. So I don't think that they're just going to call it quits because the US threatened to strike some bridges and energy facilities. So to confuse the ceasefire for those the other outcomes that people are looking for in the economy, I don't think it's wise. And kind of like another concrete explanation of where we're at here is like looking at the whole Pakistani mediation of the conflict, where Pakistan was mediating between the US and Iran. There was kind of like 2 draft proposals put out for what a resolution of the conflict would look like. The Iranian proposal included a right to enrichment. The US proposal didn't. The Iranian proposal said that a ceasefire in Lebanon was required for a ceasefire and for the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. The US and Israel are saying that the conflict between Israel and Lebanon should be considered off limits. So there's all of these like very kind of thorny issues that need to be resolved. And there's like a real question of whether the kind of like US negotiating team is really set up to achieve these outcomes. So like with Vice President Vance, he kind of made a cheeky statement that reflects the kind of gulf in the negotiating positions between the US and Iran. Want to play
Holly Bob said, which again I found fascinating, is he said, "We refuse to give up the right to enrichment." And I thought to myself, you know what? My wife has the right to skydive, but she doesn't jump out of an airplane because she and I have an agreement that she's not going to do that because I don't want my wife jumping out of an airplane. We don't really concern ourselves with what they claim they have the right to do. We concern ourselves with what they actually do. And I think the president's been very clear on the enrichment question. Our position on that has not changed.
Yeah. So, like, imagine you're the
I mean,
Iranian
she's
side.
pregnant, so it makes sense that he would want her jumping out of a plane. I get it. But go on.
Yeah. And it's like, imagine you're the Iranian side and you just, expended political capital to get these negotiations with the US. And the vice president of Iran is like comparing you to his wife. Like, it's just a very strange analogy and reflects a lack of alignment on the most fundamental issue at play here, which is whether Iran has a right to enrichment. That is the initial impetus for the conflict. So
Yeah.
will we go ahead?
No, I was just gonna say, but and also it's just like what's actually happening, right? So like there's the ceasefire that's supposed to be in effect, but what does it actually look like on the ground? Like we have a market on like Strait of Hormuz and what's going on there. Like what is that looking like?
Yeah, and so before the conflict, there's about 135 vessels transiting through the Strait of Hormuz a month carrying oil, and that is like what a return to normal would look like. This is very unlikely. As of right now, the Strait of Hormuz, we're maybe getting like a few vessels here and there transiting a day, but the Trump administration is saying that they consider it to still be closed. Iran is saying that because the conflict between Israel and Lebanon has continued, that they don't think that the US and Israel are doing what they agreed to do for Iran to open the Strait of Hormuz. So we think it's very, very unlikely that the Strait reopens to the extent that would allow kind of the flow of trade that the market calls for. And Polymarket agrees, but we're a lot more bearish than Polymarket here, especially because there's this other factors. Even if the Iranians and US came to an agreement to reopen it, there's allegedly mines that need to be removed. Ships need to procure insurance. Iran has started to charge ships a lot of money to transit through the Strait of Hormuz, which creates a disincentive for them to accept an agreement where they would lose that right to toll ships, which the Trump administration is saying is unacceptable. So will the ceasefire hold nominally? Yes, but like the biggest issue for most people in the world when it comes to this conflict is when the Strait of Hormuz is going to reopen to normal. And we don't see that happening anytime soon.
And then also just with like the ceasefire, there's a lot of complications and it seems like miscommunication regarding what was going on in Lebanon. What do what does our Q think about that? What is the market saying about what happened there this week?
Yeah, again, very kind of pessimistic. So, as context, Israel was threatening a big ground offensive into southern Lebanon, where they were saying that they were going to evict Hezbollah from the areas south of the Litani River. And they began some operations. They've been striking Hezbollah positions, taking out senior Hezbollah leadership. And the Iranians said, hey, this is a violation of our agreement. The United States and Israel were saying, hey, like this is a separate conflict that Israel and Hezbollah, let's say, have had for a while. This is a separate issue. And we're very kind of skeptical that Netanyahu is going to really tone this down in a meaningful way because there's not really constraints for Netanyahu. Like Trump said that he called Netanyahu and told him to be a bit more low key in Lebanon. And I don't think that a off the cuff request to be more low key is going to stop kind of the Israeli military from going after Hezbollah. Especially because there is some kind of talk of maybe Israel and Lebanon will enter negotiations. But what Israel wants is Hezbollah to disarm. And Hezbollah is organized around the concept of resistance against Israel. They have an AK-47 on their flag. Are they really going to disarm? And even if they were, is that going to happen in the next like 2.5 weeks? Like, I don't think so. And this is really important for people to understand because the conflict between Israel and Lebanon is probably the biggest spoiling factor for a deal that results in returning to something that approximates normal. So this is definitely something that can throw a wrench in getting a negotiated agreement that everyone feels good about.
So if I'm putting it all together, it's like that we have the ceasefire. The strait is basically closed. It's definitely not operating at normal levels. Lebanon was still getting hit post ceasefire, but maybe it's like calmed down a bit, but there's still some complexity with Hezbollah. And even the broker within Pakistan is kind of telling a different story than kind of what the US was saying. And then there's all these markets on Polymarket. And for me, like the takeaway is that like the markets on Polymarket, it's based on a time frame that feels too tight for any of that to resolve. And a lot of what you shared was also kind of the insight as to like why Q differentiated from the market, but it's also just like a time frame. Like from my perspective, it's just like, how is this all going to happen so quickly? So I think there's probably some of the like inconsistency between Q and the market that's based on time.
Yeah, it's like the Parent Trap. Like Pakistan is like the twins, and they're trying to bring the family back together with US and Iran. And they were maybe misrepresented what the agreement between the two sides was a little bit. And now there's some very serious issues to work through. And does that mean that there won't be a real negotiated settlement that involves compromises on the nuclear program and increased Iranian sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz and all these other things that are at play? Like, it's definitely possible, but is it going to happen in the next like 2.5 weeks? Probably not.
So how this is going to work is that like we've each brought a market that the other person hasn't seen. And the idea is just like to ask them to like, would you trade it? So I'll go first. Let me just pull my screen up. Okay. So Jordan, who will Justin Bieber feature at Coachella? He's headlining this weekend. I'm super pumped. Who do you think his special guest is going to be?
It's definitely going to be Usher, 100%, because I feel like there's kind of like a nostalgic vibe in the culture right now. People are reaching towards things that are familiar, and like Usher is like the spiritual antecedent of Justin Bieber, in my view, with the dancing and so on. So that's who I would guess. And it looks like the market is understanding of that view.
Yeah, I mean,
He's not too out of the running.
I think Usher is maybe a safe bet, but I think it's probably going to be Post Malone. I think Posty has like some really good energy. I'm not sure like the vibe of Coachella is like Usher right now. Also, was on Bieber's album and they did some songs together and he did open for his tour, his Purpose World Tour. So they are really friends. So I think that could also be like a strong front runner.
Okay. Well, now I have
See,
a reason to scroll Instagram on Coachella related stories.
you're welcome.
Um,
Okay,
okay. Let me pull up mine
I'm
for
excited.
you. So if you saw Trump's Easter True Social post, he, praise be to Allah, as part of his kind of broadside against Iran and request for them to capitulate.
Yeah.
So will he say it again? Will he have a little moment in a press conference where he's like, and they told me not to say it, but I have to say it, praise be to Allah. Like, are we gonna get that, or is Allah out of his lexicon now?
I think if he was left to like alone to do whatever he wanted, and not have any outside opinions, I think we would 100% get another praise be Allah. I think that he probably got some guidance from some of his advisors, which is maybe telling him like that's not the right approach. So I would probably say, I don't know. I'm gonna go with yes. I'm gonna go with yes because
Wow.
I think that I don't know. I think he's totally unpredictable, and I think he likes catchphrases. And
I love watching your train of thought here. You're like, he probably has advisors who would advise him not to.
yeah,
Oh.
yeah, like that. I think he likes a good catchphrase, and he did it in all caps.
I think
that
that
means it's important.
I think that he'll say it, but I think it will be if and when some sort of deal is announced. I can see the True Social post be like, praise be to Allah, like we reached like a tremendous deal with Iran. We're going to get a lot of oil. They're going to stop with the missiles. They're still going to have missiles, but they're going to be little small missiles. They're not going to have the ability to whatever, right? So it's possible.
I think it's a yes.
Got it. So we're not gonna see Usher at Coachella. We're gonna see Posty and Justin Bieber, and we're going to get a praise be to Allah. But you say yes. But are you saying yes within the next 5 days, or are you saying yes?
Sorry. That I think that's actually an important note is that there's a lot in the prediction markets around the resolution criteria that's really important. So it's not just like ever. So by April 15th, that's in 5 days. No, that's too soon. But I think it will come back again. But I think in the next 5 days, no, that feels too soon to me. I think the first one is still like, it feels like it's vibrating on a high frequency within the like meta culture. So it would be too soon to repeat it. Thanks for that reminder to bring it back to the date.
No problem.
Okay.
Cool.
All right, so that's what we have this week. If you want to see Q's full forecast and all the positions we talked about, you can head to our app. It's app.quotient.social. You can follow us on X at QuotientHQ. And if you like this, please share with your friends, talk to people about it, and kind of check out Quotient and what we're doing. And as a reminder, nothing we talk about on the show is financial advice. Always do your own research before making any trades. Peace.
Great. Thank you.